Welcome, folks, to a new episode of Common Sense Podcast with me, Mike Omni. It's a joy to have you back. We are back to somewhat of a regular schedule. So thank you if you enjoyed last week's episode. Conversation with, oh my gosh, I forgot his name. That's really sad. Chris Revo, that's his name, who was a social media strategist, social media expert. If you haven't listened to that, do listen because he spoke about social media and just how we navigate a digital age. And I've had some comments from people who said they really enjoyed it. And by the way, folks, you can let me know what you think about episodes. This is meant to be a kind of two-way thing. So if you enjoy episodes, let us know. The social media handles are Common Sense Pod on Instagram and Twitter. You can follow to see some, I guess, bonus assets and stuff. But you can also leave a review. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can go on Apple Podcasts and drop a review. Let us know what you think about it. 5 stars, 4 stars, whatever it is. But what I'm really interested in is your feedback, i.e., it's going well, or I like this, or stop doing this, or do more of that. And if actually you're thinking, you know what, I really enjoy this podcast, but I think it could improve in some way, we're actually looking to grow our team. So you can join our team. We got a producer, but you can join and become one of the producers, or maybe it's social media you're passionate about. Just drop us a message. Again, Common Sense Pod on Instagram and on Twitter. Just DM us if you're interested in joining the team and helping out this podcast. Helping it grow, whether it's booking guests or suggesting topics. I would love to have some people who listen join. I always find that people who listen, like you guys or watch, are always make the best team members because you've got the context, the podcast, the strengths, the weaknesses. So do reach out to us if you're interested in that. Today's episode is interesting. It's fun because we're going to be talking about all the different ways our lives have changed, so to speak, because of COVID. Obviously, in the UK, pretty much across all the different nations now, everyone's agreeing that we've got to move to past Freedom Day, so to speak. So Wales equally are lifting lockdown restrictions. Scotland's doing the same. And we are running towards a new normal. And I just thought this was a good time to put a comma on our lives a bit and just consider, right, all the different ways our lives have changed and all the different things not Zoom. Ergo, how important Zoom is in our life. I can't get through a sentence without bringing Zoom up. But all the different ways our lives has changed because of COVID. McKinsey released a really interesting report that talked about, some top level stats that show just all the different ways our lives has changed and the kind of digital age, if you like, that COVID has exacerbated. The headline is essentially that we've covered a decade in days when it comes to the adoption of digital, right? So I'll give you some stats really quickly. As it pertains to online delivery, during the peak COVID, we saw 10 years of online delivery done in 8 weeks, right? Which is just crazy for e-commerce, right? When it comes to Zoom or video conferencing, peak COVID over a 3-month period saw 20 times more people online doing Zoom and doing video conferencing, which is crazy. When it comes to remote learning, in terms of students in China who went online, 250 million children in China went online across a 2-week period. And when it comes to online entertainment, essentially the stat also shows that we basically covered 7 years in about 5 months, right? Disney Plus, which was a new kind of streaming software that launched, achieved in 2 weeks what it took Netflix 7 years to achieve. So it's undeniable that COVID and lockdown and kind of the self-isolation, stuff like that, really exacerbated this new age we're living in now. And even as we go back to a new normal, I'm just really curious as to what will happen. Will these trends keep staying the way they are? I don't know. But also, I would love to find out from you if you're listening or watching, how COVID's changed your life. What's changed? What's happened as a result of COVID? Let us know. I'm going to bring on a guest who's going to help me navigate, this conversation. He's an entrepreneur and a writer, David Elikwu. He's been on the podcast before, and I saw a really interesting tweet from him saying he was going to be launching a new project. And when I was reading this report and I saw his tweet, I kind of thought this is interesting because what he's launching, when you map it against, everything I just told you, all the stats I just told you, they almost seem a bit juxtaposed. Is this the time to launch something new? I don't know. So I thought I would ask him and just get a sense of why, when, how, so on and so forth. So let's bring on David. David, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks. Thanks for having me on.
This is your second time on. You might as well pull up a chair. I
Yes.
mean,
Feeling very welcome. Although I think both of our backgrounds have changed since then.
yes. Oh my gosh, this is true. So I've moved houses. I did it just a few weeks ago. Where have you moved as well, I'm guessing?
No, I mean I've just moved rooms, so now I have a dedicated like office space at home, which is good.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm trying to get my office kind of. So I've got a desk, which you can not there. Sorry, a kind of what do you call it? Like just a cabinet behind me, which is a bit boring. You've managed to get this thing suspended on the wall, which looks far fancier. And how have you
Oh
done
yeah,
that?
I mean it's not too difficult actually. It's just got a few nails in the back. These are the DIY skills you pick up in a pandemic.
Yeah. So I spoke about moving houses there. I I recently obviously moved houses. It was unfurnished, so I had to go to IKEA to get all the product like beds and whatever. And honestly speaking, I don't think I've been as stretched as I was a few weeks ago when it came to putting together IKEA furniture. There's a bit of an art form to it because their instruction manuals are a bit odd. Like they just have like a couple of diagrams and circles. And I'm thinking, why don't they just write down what you're meant to do?
Yeah, a lot of it you kind of figure out, or by virtue of having done lots of other IKEA projects, you kind of figure out this is what they're expecting from me, and this is
Yeah.
the direction we're going in.
So I don't even
But
know
I was
why I'm
going to say,
cracking myself.
I find it interesting that you've moved to London because I feel like a lot of people are going in the other direction, particularly as you mentioned in terms of things that are changing in the pandemic. I feel like maybe we'll talk about it a bit more, but now that a lot more people are working remotely or there's a lot more flexibility and freedom, there's a lot of people that are thinking about some form of maybe geographical arbitrage where maybe you move somewhere that's cheaper to live or more affordable. You might as well save on your rent costs. If you're not going to be traveling in or commuting to work, then a lot of people are thinking about maybe moving outside and not feeling just tied to London or the commuter belt.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I've had some messages. Obviously, it was in Manchester for a while, and so people have been messaging me like, what are the house prices like there? What's like to buy there? Because people are genuinely, as you said, considering just leaving London, getting a house somewhere else, and just working online, so to speak. It's interesting because I definitely want to. I want you to kind of say a bit more about what you do for people who are kind of wondering. Writer and entrepreneur seems very I, I was I was recently on GB News giving my thoughts on something, and in the kind of lower third, as it were, they put entrepreneur, and then because I was talking about something quite charged, which was like stop and search. Someone in the replies was like, "What does this guy do? What's this entrepreneur?" They were like, "Sounds very vague," and I thought, "Oh gosh." So I want to find out a bit more about what you do, and perhaps that's a good place to start. Actually, this idea of relocating, moving, and working online, and whether that's here to stay. Of course, we all know most companies have committed to a sort of, part work at home, work in the office type of situation. I just wonder what the long term nature is that, of that is. But before we go there, just for people who are wondering and want to know a bit more about you, what exactly do you do?
Yeah, sure. So full time, I'm still working full time. I'm working in tech at the moment, and ironically, as you just mentioned, we've been working remotely over the last year, but we're going to be moving towards a hybrid kind of working model. So probably doing maybe 2 or 3 days in the office and the rest working remotely. So that's what I do full time. But then also I write online. So I have a newsletter called The Knowledge, and I write quite widely. I also write fiction as well, which is a lot of fun. And then business wise, so yes, I'm an entrepreneur. I've run a few businesses. I used to run a travel business, which was a travel collective. That's pre-COVID, prior to the pandemic. But we have a travel podcast, and then I also have a personal podcast with The Knowledge, and then I have the coffee and wine business. So we sell African coffee online and also wine that's sourced from, I guess, small family estates around Europe. So that's Democratic Republic or Demrep World online. And so, yeah, so we sell those. And as you mentioned, we are expanding, I guess, our online presence of previously just doing direct to consumer coffee and wine, and opening a coffee space in Shoreditch soon.
Wow, that's a lot of things, and
It's
and you're
probably too
burning
much.
well. You don't look stressed as well. You know, some people when they say what they do, you can see it. Like you can see it on their face. They say
Yeah.
like they do 5 things. You go, I can tell. You know, I'm that type of guy actually. When I tell people that they're like, yeah, you need to rest. Like you look like you need to rest. Whereas you look very effervescent. You look very kind of relaxed. And
I mean, that's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that. I don't always feel that way, but it's
what's
good
your
to get
daily
that
routine? I'm
impression.
joking. I'm joking. This is what people ask all the time. What's your daily facial routine or something? I've heard someone say that once.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
A
just
lot of
cream my
people are
face.
getting into those kind of things. I think particularly during the pandemic, I think it's really accelerated because some of these trends existed in terms of, for example, like desk setups and daily routines, morning routines, people trying out. I saw someone recently was saying they were trying out just some random old ladies like morning routine as though that was going to do something for their life. I don't know. So some of these trends existed, but I guess now that everyone's been at home, people are those things have accelerated a lot.
Yeah. I should say for those wondering, I have no routine. I should say though, I have been told I have nice skin, and then girls always say it. They're like, how do you have it? I genuinely do nothing. This is
I'm
all
sure
the
you drink a lot of water though. That's
Yeah,
usually
I do drink. To be fair, I do have a lot
key.
of fluids. I was talking to my friend yesterday about our fridge is just full of fluids. So yeah, that is true. But let's pick up on this idea of relocating and working from home. I told you before at the start that this McKinsey report was revealing that since lockdown, there's been a 20x increase in Zoom daily participants. That is crazy to think about. 20x in a year is, I mean, for any company, that's just. I mean, that's like winning the lottery 6 days in a row or something. It's just we don't get 20x growth like that in a year, especially when you're a pretty big company already. So away from Zoom and the kind of successes they've had, that's obviously going to change things quite a bit. McKinsey also reported that there's been a rise in unemployment, that there's been a decline in kind of on-the-go consumption, and remote working has become this kind of new thing. Now you mentioned there you remote work. Or there's a kind of do you see as viable long term to just kind of for companies to kind of just be remote and to have all these different employees dotted in Manchester and Newcastle and some in London? Do you think that's actually something that might exist long term?
You know what? I guess that's what we're going to have to figure out. I think remote working is one of those things that people have wanted for a long time, and employees have always asked for more working flexibility, and it's always something that employers have been very reticent to give them. And so it's very interesting that, again, I feel like the pandemic has really just accelerated a lot of things that already existed in some ways. There were already lots of companies where maybe they had hot desking in the office, or they were at least moving in that direction. And maybe what people could take 1 or 2 days off. And now we're kind of getting to the reverse where people are expecting a minimum of 2 or 3 days off. And really they're asking for maybe more than that. And so I think it will be an interesting transition period. It will depend on the industry, obviously. There's some industries where it's going to be necessary that people need to be there all the time. But I do think that the perspectives of the individual workers have changed a lot. People are now coming towards jobs with a lot more expectations of what they should have, what they are willing to take in a job. I think we've also seen record numbers of people leaving jobs, both in the US and in the UK. So people are just quitting their jobs. They're not getting fired. They're just thinking about, what do I really want from this job? People want to be more flexible. They want to have all these perks or whatever it is, and they're voting with their feet.
Yeah, a part of me always wants to kind of ascertain, what part of certain change, are you getting great adoption for? Because it's novel and new, and what part is are we having adoption because it's actually good? So I know lots of people, like you just mentioned, who quit their job during lockdown. Young guys that I mentor, general kind of just friends who just like, what, I've had enough. This thing isn't fulfilling me. It's not, it's not consistent with my purpose or how I see myself in the world, and then they essentially leave. and working from home, as you've said, has been this thing that everyone's accepted. I just wonder, again, is it because it's like novel and new and it's kind of like different because there is also something about the regularity of like having a space for work. So I'm privileged like you are. There's this office which is separate to my room and to my living room and my flatmate's room. There's separation, but most people, especially in London, for instance, do not have the luxury of a private office or like a separate room that they can make an office. If anything, their office is attached to their bed, it's in the living room, and so it's kind of it's
Yeah.
quite chaotic. So long term, is that really doable if we don't have the wide infrastructure change? Of like new homes where people are thinking about an office space, or one bed apartments where you're thinking about, oh, here's a special room for an office. If that doesn't happen as well, long term, does it work? It makes me it brings to memory this TikTok I saw of I wish I could just show it. Maybe in post we'll put it up, of this lady who says me working from home in Ghana, and she's literally sat on a desk working from, and there's just cows like running around her. I just like doing the most, and I just thought to myself, no, when we say working from home, as someone who looks after a company, and someone like you as well, is there that fear that this can't work long term? This might be a nice thing for now, but how do I know people aren't going to be in the park, having a cordial with just like logged into Skype for business?
Yeah, I mean that's where having a strong company culture, or those are the things that people have to figure out. But it's funny because I was one of those people that literally just worked from my room up until recently, and I think again these are the things that it's because the pandemic in some ways has lasted so long. People have been forced to adjust, because previously I had the same desk, but I was working in my room and I had these things in my room, and it's only when you have this prolonged period of needing to change that you kind of adapt to it. And that's why I'm thinking that in some ways I do think some elements will last at least for a while longer, because so many people have adapted. Like now I've had to set up this whole separate room with a desk and all these things, and now I'm quite comfortable here. So now you're asking me to go all the way back to an office for more than, let's say, 3 days a week, after people have already maybe spent a lot of money, or gone to a lot of extents to create comfortable working spaces at home. Or some people, maybe they're working in coffee shops or other places. I think there's a balance there. But it's funny with what you were mentioning before, because I think there's some things that are in some ways because it's novel. But when you think about it, like even the Zoom thing, okay, loads more people are using Zoom. In some ways, that's not surprising, because we've had to figure out how else are we going to meet, how else are we going to talk, how else will we have discussions. But in some ways, it's not new at all. Like we've had Skype since the early 2000s or even earlier, for such a long time. Video calling is not a new thing. It's existed in so many formats, in so many ways. I remember there used to be like a Skype phone also in the early 2000s. So again, before FaceTime was a thing, before all of these new tools existed, we've had a lot of the technology to do some of these things, but we haven't had the necessity to use them in the way that we have. So I think in some ways, maybe it's easy to transition back to living the way that we have. But I think what's really changed is the mindset. It's not so much that the technology is new. It's more that people are thinking in slightly different ways and reconsidering, do we need to have this meeting in real life? Do we need to have this meeting? Can we just chat via Slack or send an email or have a text discussion? So I think people are thinking about things in new ways. There's people I've met for coffee where we've just done it virtually. Now maybe there's people I've met in real life as well. But again, we're reconsidering a lot of these things. So I think the good part is that I think some of it will have long-lasting impact in terms of businesses and individuals thinking more carefully about the way they do different things. But I do think there's some of it will return, because you do need some element of camaraderie. It's weird. I met someone at work for only the second time. We've been working together for like over a year, and we only met for the second time ever this week, or a few weeks ago. So I do think you need some aspects of, team collaboration and camaraderie, and even just between friends, between social groups. You need a lot of that as humans. But I do think that being able to have those options is a great thing, and having people be comfortable with those options now is also a great thing.
I think one interesting thing that it's quite subtle, but it struck me as quite interesting was, as you said, the whole working from home, the advent of remote working, whatever it was. In part, that was because of protecting people's mental health, protecting them, as it were. And then slowly it became about company efficiency, the fact that people are actually more efficient the more they work from home, right? And so I just wonder, as someone who is greatly interested in digital proliferation and stuff like that, this rush to digital, whilst you're right, it makes us more dynamic. It makes working more interesting because there's all these kind of different things, different ways you can do it. Is it good for us though? One of the stats that came from the McKinsey report was, again, that in terms of e-learning and learning, remote learning has become this big thing as well. We all know about students who had to do a whole year of university online. In fact, even next month in September, some universities, I won't name and shame them, have equally said they're going to stay online. 35% of Netflix subscribers, according to YouGov, use it for the educational content. They're talking about meeting people online, working online. At a time where we're being told, all the reports are showing the negative effect that the kind of digital citizenship and living online is having on people, should we really be celebrating a kind of a greater, faster move online? Is that a good thing?
I'd say I'm kind of torn between both sides of the argument, because in some ways, I think that the future of education will probably be very remote, and in some ways it should be. I think that, imagine a world where you have huge immigrants populations in the UK, the US, loads of countries around the world, which solely exist. Not everyone, but a large proportion of people are coming to give their children a better shot at education and life and working and all those things. But imagine if it's remote, you don't have to leave Nigeria or Pakistan or China. You could just stay there and sign up for the University College of London or King's College or Oxford or Cambridge completely online from Pakistan and learn everything that you need to learn and get the skills that you need. Obviously, and then maybe there's work that you could do, again, remotely. And so in some ways, it could help to bolster the global workforce greatly, and it could change a lot about how we think about collaborating with each other. Even as a small business, for example, it's made me reconsider, because before, I think when we were bringing on new people, even as interns, I would always think people have to be based in London because I'm based in London. What if we want to meet up? Not that we're actually doing anything in a physical space, but you think that you need to be in the same city to be able to work effectively. But I think one of the things that the pandemic has made me think about is that often we don't. And so I think one of the recent applications that we were doing for a role, I had people applying from Ghana, people applying from Nigeria, from other places. And I mean, we didn't end up hiring anyone from there, but it did make me seriously think about how much we actually need someone to be here, because some of these time zones in Africa are only an hour away. And so there's actually no real difference. So I think on one hand, there's a great promise. On the other hand, I do think that there can be some difficulties. I do think that particularly for younger people, having your entire life move online, when we haven't even figured out the existing stuff. So again, pre-pandemic, we already had issues with the mental health of young people being exposed to social media, being exposed to Instagram, being exposed to TikTok. I think there's already so much toxicity that we haven't learned to navigate. And then you're adding on top of that, the only time that they would have had for socialization, to go outside and play and to meet friends and meet people. Now people are making, I mean, we've done this again in some ways in the past, but I think the difference was before you would go out to school, then people would come home. Sometimes people would play video games at home, but then you would also have a chance to go outside. And I think we've moved from that to you stay in your room, you go to school in your room, you play with your friends in your room, then you go online, you play some video games, you meet people, but it's all entirely virtual. And so I think that is the one worry, that people won't really have social skills in the way that we've had before, and people won't really be able to navigate whether it's making friends, managing relationships, things like that.
And as you say that, I don't consider that like a kind of one of the small issues. I think that's a really big problem. I have a younger brother. I have younger siblings, and when I look at their ability to navigate real world relationships, it's really bad. In that, even before COVID, I was already worried about their attention span, for instance, the fact that I could be talking to, I don't know, name anybody. I could be talking to one of my younger siblings, and past 5 minutes, they're bored. Now, it may be me. Let's also put that on the table. Maybe I'm just not interested, right? But I could see them struggling to kind of pay attention, even watching videos. If there's a YouTube video that's like 5 minutes, that it's like they're like, I can't actually watch this.
Because that's a trend as well, right? With even the type of content that we consume, it's getting shorter and shorter. Before you watch an hour-long YouTube video, then it's 30 minutes, then it's 1 minute, 15 seconds.
Yeah, and for me, my age and folks who are older than me listening to this, they're aware that this new digital age, it's going to be some sort of blended thing. I don't like my phone. I complain about it all the time. I try and put it away. I have periods where I don't touch it, and most people older than me have that kind of blended way of living, so to speak. But I find young people and old people, so folks at the extremes, so aunties and uncles live on Facebook, as we know, and in some ways are just as bad as the young people we're talking about who don't have the kind of aptitude and so on and so forth. It scares me because as I read more of these trends, like I said, this report was really fascinating. Some of the numbers excite me, some scare me. So the fact that we've had an 80% reduction in international travel, right, is a bit scary. Because yes, of course, for the tourism industry, that's a problem. But also, I was speaking to one of my younger brothers, and I said, when the world opens back up, would you love to, we should go to America, And he was like, nah, I don't want to go. I said, why? And he was like, it's long. And I thought, what? When I was young, travel was like winning the lottery. I would be on a plane like, I can't believe this is happening to me. Just like, we're going to go see somewhere else, because there was that natural curiosity to experience another culture, to go see different things. The problem is he's seen America on like TikTok 1 million times. And so the idea of going there is like, there's nothing to gain because I've already seen it. Isn't that again, another reason, to be kind of watchful and very kind of careful about this digital age that I think sometimes we celebrate so quickly for its efficiency and the fact that it makes life kind of, faster. It's like, yeah, but it's ruining, I think, to some degree, young people's experiences of the world.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And I think also when you layer on top of that, the fact that a lot of the perceptions that we have of whether it's places or things or other people's lives, it's through a very particular lens. Again, often through like apps like Instagram or some of these platforms where, I see a lot. I've been to Japan a few times and I really enjoy going. But all the pictures that you see of Japan on the internet are always these like heavily color graded. They've made all the colors pop. And I'm like, I love it, but it doesn't actually look exactly like that. Like if you if you got to go, you might see that it's not quite like that, but it's still great. And so I think that's the interesting thing, where a lot of people might see some of these things online, but that's not actually what some of these countries look like. That's not actually what places look like. And it's only until you go there or until you experience some of these things for yourself that you understand what they're like. But similarly, a lot of people, I think part of the issue with the internet in general now, particularly with the younger generation, is that it also adds a lot of comparison bias with their peers, because you don't really know who your peers are anymore. I think before, exactly who your age mates are, and exactly what maybe the expectations of what you should have or what opportunities will be available to you or what you can afford are. Whereas now you're on the internet, people are on Twitter, people are on Instagram. You don't know how old these people are. You don't know what their backgrounds are. You don't know what their social status is, but you see the things that they have, what they can afford. Maybe they have surgery. Maybe they look like this. Maybe they can afford these things. And you think, wow, that you need it as well. And so I think people aren't able to, not necessarily, just benchmark themselves against other people, but I think it does mislead people a lot about what they should expect from their life or from society. And that also drives people to feeling unfulfilled, feeling as though they're not able to do the things that they would like to do, not really knowing that it's actually quite unrealistic for you to be doing all those things. And so I think in general, it just warps some of our perception of what the world around us is like.
That's very well said. I was talking to an older kind of pastor not too long ago. He was talking about social media. And he was talking about, when he was young, people oftentimes would compare themselves to celebrities. But of course, the issue with that, or the interesting thing about that was, sorry, listen, I was just swearing at you. I wasn't. I'm just cleaning us. Sorry. For those who are listening, I just swore at our guest, but it wasn't on purpose. Anyways, he was talking about how, back in the days, you would kind of pick up a magazine, and then you may just happen to see what a celebrity's worth because you picked it up, or you see them in a nice Lamborghini, whatever. But those magazines were, they were, you seldom saw them. It was kind of, maybe you stumbled somewhere or someone showed you, like, oh, interesting. And you might kind of compare yourself for a minute, but it's gone. And so with social media now, it's literally built around celebrities, i.e., celebrities have the most followers. They're the ones who change and pretty much dominate the whole kind of landscape of social media. They're the ones who dictate how it's used. They sell things. They're the ones who do promo. They're the ones who are used for marketing. And so before, where you would stumble upon what a celebrity's worth, you now see it pretty much every single day. They're posting every single day. They're doing IG lives. They're telling you how great their life is. Now, twin with it what you've just said, which is, on top of comparing yourself to celebrities, you're not comparing yourself to every kind of person, it seems like, that's interested in what you're interested in. Not even just your friends, but as you said, folks in America, folks in, you don't even know what things cost in Mexico, but you'll compare yourself to the guy anyways, in terms of what he has and what you don't have. And that incessant comparison and just thinking and information, it's got to be debilitating. And when I look at some young people in my life, I can see the fruit. They're scared to. I've given this example like 100 times, where people say people don't post on social media, and you say why, and they're like, oh, I don't have an announcement to make yet. I don't have anything to say that's like grand. And you go, yo, it was just for taking pictures back in the days, right?
Yeah, all that's not what it's for.
It's scary. It's really, really scary to me. But I do want to get to one thing, which has also changed, which I'm probably guilty of exacerbating the change as well, which is, of course, kind of shopping and consumption, and just how COVID or lockdown has really exacerbated this surge in e-commerce, right? The report I was reading said something really interesting, which I want to get your take on, David, because especially because of what you're about to launch, which obviously I think we can talk about now. The lockdown has shown or revealed that the people in their consumption trends have a preference for trusted brands. There's a shift in, shopping at stores closer to home, where before folks would kind of venture and travel to different places to get things. There's great polarization when it comes to sustainability, in that, and what I mean by that is, some people are very, like, COVID has meant they really care about sustainability, whereas some, they actually care less now about sustainability, maybe because they're just thinking about, I just need the cheapest thing. I don't have time for fair trade or what it's doing to the world, so to speak, right? But I think the large, and there was one also quirk, which I think we all know, which is that this is really random statistic, but according to, again, the research done, people are shopping less, but they're buying more when they shop, which may be because of that period when we went shopping and, like, you didn't know how long the queue was going to be next time you go get food. So shopping baskets are larger, but shopping frequency is reduced. So in the middle of all these consumption trends, you decided, David, you're going to launch a coffee shop, but also, I think you're going to be selling wine as well. So it's like a coffee wine joint, but why?
It's a good question. Well, I think we can tie some of what we've just been talking about together. So there's this, the concept of mimesis in general, which Rene Girard writes about a lot. And I think that applies to what we were talking about just before in terms of how, so the concept of mimesis is about how we copy each other, when we copy the traits and we copy the things that other people do, and that's how we learn about the world. And I think that is something that we see a lot in consumer traits, where particularly when things are online, how do you know how to furnish your house? You go on Pinterest, you go on Instagram, and you see what other people are buying, and you see what's recommended to you by algorithms. You don't know how anyone decides on what to show you, but those are the things that you're shown, those are the things that you're fed. And so that's how people make a lot of these buying decisions. It's largely by virtue of what they're exposed to, particularly when it's online, and then you decrease the friction between, okay, you've seen something on Instagram, now you can buy that same thing through Instagram, and you have this complete, vertical integration of going from seeing and consuming visually to consuming monetarily and ordering things online. So I think that is something that already existed to an extent, but particularly during the pandemic has grown a lot in terms of one, just how prone people are to mimesis in terms of copying what others do. You have, I think we talked about this earlier in this recording as well, in terms of, for example, people watch videos of, people's desk setups and tours of people's homes. And so there's a lot of consumption, which is just around how other people live. And so that on one hand, we can voyeuristically live through others, but then also that we can consume the way others consume. And so I think that's a huge part of the way that we consume now. But then I do think that you're right in terms of the other side is, people also want to consume things that they trust, because while there's been a proliferation of things that you can copy, there's also more fakes, and there's more, which one is the real one, which one is the highest quality. And so people also want to be able to trust things. And so, for example, on one hand, we've launched the direct-to-consumer e-commerce brand. So we're selling coffee and we're selling wine online directly to consumers, doing a lot of the things that we talked about, having a social media presence, selling online, being able to buy things through that platform. But I think also being able to have a physical space that people can gather around, and that people can identify with the brand, and people can build that trust with the brand, I think is super important for us as well. I think that as much as people have enjoyed the experiences online, and that's become second nature to a lot of people in terms of how they shop. But I still think that a lot of people do still want the fellowship. That I think coffee and wine are both products that are like inherently for sharing. Ironically, I wasn't planning to talk about this. I was actually going to write about it at some point, but I was reading recently, there was a really interesting book. I can't remember what it's called, but it was talking about how one of the earliest acts of like a super early, I think like a Mexican civilization, was just having these big beer gatherings. Like there's a theory that humans, even before gathering in bigger tribes or bigger towns for the sake of, I don't know, survival, actually gathered just to have parties and drink beer and drink wine and things like that. And so actually some of the early grains and things that they grew were grains that are better for fermenting alcohol rather than grains that are better for growing and feeding your cattle and things like that. But I think, throughout history, these are the kind of things that have brought people together. And I think that's something that we want to play a big part in, particularly with things like coffee, being able to bring people out of their houses and get people to meet together and bring people into physical spaces. I think that is something that is still really important, and I don't want people to forget about that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think it's going to do really well. Not least because I'll buy like half your product. I'll buy half the stock. Because I'm slowly getting back into coffee. I used to love coffee. I mean, literally, when I was young, I would drink it to go to bed. I would drink it in the morning. I just coffee. Man, I think, and it came from me trying to copy my dad. Actually, he used to drink coffee, so I was like, what is this thing? So I would drink coffee as well. Then I discovered Coffee Mate at that time, which was out. It was like, what? This thing tastes even better. Then I started going to all these kind of artisan and kind of, specialist coffee shops that make all these random ways. And then I became a coffee snob. Oh, you drink at Starbucks? Oh, it's not real coffee, that kind of stuff, right? And then my eyes used to twitch from like, I think too much caffeine. So I stopped and I moved to tea instead. And tea is very different. And for me, I'm an obsessive kind of person, so I got into tea big time, loose leaf tea and all the different how teas compose, just all that kind of nonsense. And they're worlds within themselves. And now I'm kind of like really considering: am I a tea person or a coffee person? Because I like the subtleness of tea, and I like how obviously because it's caffeine, but it's not as in terms of the coffees I drink anyways. It's just not as strong, and it's a bit more balanced, and my energy levels and the tension tends to kind of be a bit more balanced when I drink tea. It's probably a stupid question, me asking someone about to launch a coffee shop what they prefer, coffee or tea, but with everything just said, where do you lean?
I actually have both. So usually, I think I'll have coffee in the morning and then tea more later in the afternoon. But one thing that I would say for you, and then also something I recommend in general, you should actually try some of the other coffees that we have, because so we sell only African coffees. I don't know if we have time to talk about the history of coffee in Africa and colonialism and all those things,
Well,
but
I think you covered it in our last podcast, so it's a good
did
way
I?
to
Fantastic.
point people back. Yeah, so guys, go listen to the last podcast I did with David. He talks at length about just the history of coffee in Africa and why Democratic Republic exists, which is amazing.
Yeah, but the point I was just going to make is that actually some African coffees are also very light and you can enjoy them like teas. And because the flavor is, yeah, it's very light, you can have them black without any issue. And it doesn't taste just like as coarse or as, maybe like instant coffee or some very strong coffee. So I think there's a wide variety of tastes within when you get to know coffee better and you know what tastes like what, then you know that there's a wider variety for however you're feeling
Yeah.
at the time.
So I guess my thing is I don't want to crash. And
Yeah.
that's probably why I stopped drinking coffee. I don't want to kind of be like, whoa, in the morning, like, you're like, come on, let's go. And then like literally by 1, you're done. How do I ensure that doesn't happen? That I don't crash?
Yeah, sure. I think the timing is one. I've been thinking or reading a lot about like coffee and sleep and things like that. I think you can avoid crashing by one, I guess, drinking in moderation in the first place. I think very often people just drink a whole lot of coffee very quickly and then that's the end. Whereas if you drink slowly, which I think is something that we should encourage in general, just eating and drinking more slowly, then I think the amount of coffee that you're getting is prolonged. But then also maybe you could try different types of coffee. So different types of coffee might have a different caffeine content. So if you're drinking a coffee that has like a super high caffeine content and your baseline is much lower than that, then that's kind of where some of the effects of crashing comes from. Whereas if you are having coffee that has lower caffeine, then you don't feel those effects in the same way. So I'd say
What
that
what
also
what
just
what
drink
what what,
water.
what are your what are your thoughts on decaffeinated coffee?
I'm not a huge fan, if I'm honest. Just I'm not a huge fan because I think there's huge benefits of caffeine. However, I also think there's some pros because I think people also miss out that coffee has loads of other benefits aside from caffeine. And so actually, if you're having decaffeinated coffee that's actually coming from just whole coffee beans, you're actually getting still a lot of the other benefits of coffee, but maybe without the caffeine. But I still think that just try different types of coffee. Maybe like Tanzania Machwari is one of the coffees that we have that is a lot lower on caffeine and it's quite a light coffee.
Yeah. Wow, I feel like I've just been to coffee school and I went online. Would you look at that? No, listen, this was brilliant. I wish you all the success with obviously the business. It's launch. I hope people go check it out. It's launching. I know it's probably you don't want to give a date, I imagine, but people can check it out very soon.
Yes, hopefully
And
later this month.
superb. They follow you, the Elikwu, and you'll see it in the in the description, whatever it is. Tap it, follow, and support. I mean, support. Yes, it's a black business, but it's good. It's good coffee, premium quality type of stuff. And so, like I said, I'll be there the minute you guys open. You let me know because I'm probably a stone throw away now. 20-something minutes, 30 minutes maybe. I'll be there trying out the Tanzanian. What did you call it?
Matwari.
Matwari. I feel like coffee people just also like there's a bit of snobbery with coffee like oh, this is a Mozambique Tatwale. You're like, yeah, okay.
But I think some of it is good. I mean, part of what we want to do is be able to democratize a lot of that, and we want people to
Love
be
it.
able to understand, I guess, the history and the culture behind
Where it
some of
comes
the
from.
coffees as well.
Nah, brilliant. It's going to be stellar, man. And so I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for joining us on this episode. It's been great, folks. If you enjoyed this, please do subscribe, especially if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify, then you can follow. And then Apple Podcasts, you can leave a rating. Let us know how you find it, how you found it. The hashtag is Common Sense Pod. If you want to tell us, what you think about coffee, what kind of coffee you drink. Are you a coffee or a tea person? and perhaps you want to just share how COVID's changed your life. I'm really interested in hearing how COVID's changed people's lives. It's really helped me slow down. And some people are like, what, Mike, you think you're slow now? It's like, yeah, but I was faster before. So trust me, it's changed things. And of course, one thing I'm really open to as well is hearing from you folks who listen and who watch. What kind of guests you want us to get on this podcast as we grow, as we do more episodes. Please, again, use the DM function on social media. Just let us know what kind of guests you think would be great to speak to. I hope you have a great week, and if you listen to this not on Monday, I hope your week's going good. Thank you so much, and see you in